All right, good morning. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jeremy Glenn, and I am the General Chair of ISART 2024. So I want to welcome you to Denver, Colorado, in the kickoff for the 2024 International Symposium on Advanced Radio Technology. Welcome. So I should mention at the beginning that we sort of kicked off our symposium yesterday in a non-traditional fashion. We had an excellent tutorial session here in the plenary room, led by our fearless leader and co-technical lead, Billy Kozma, and our tutorial extraordinary, Max Hollingsworth. We had probably 20 or 30 folks in here for that tutorial and playing with propagation modeling and some data sets. So a really good kickoff to the event this year. So thank you for coming. So this is our first in-person ISART since 2018. My first ISART after joining ITS 3 years ago. And so we're thrilled to welcome you in person. Also, welcome to folks virtually. This is our first hybrid ISART. So we're glad to welcome about half our audience is virtual today and half in person. So welcome to everyone. Welcome back to specifically ISART alumni. So if you know ISART and have been here year after year, we've got plenty of folks who come annually and take part in this symposium. So we thank you for your patronage, and for anyone joining us for the first time, welcome as well. We're glad to have you, and thank you for joining us. I already mentioned the virtual stream. I just want to thank you for joining us as well. With that said, let me just go into a couple introductions in terms of who put this program together. We have two technical co-chairs to thank, Dr. Charles Dietlein and Billy Kozma from ITS for leading the technical program committee. That committee consists of Mike Cotton from ITS, Dr. Nick Lanneman, Director SpectrumX, Co-Director Wireless Institute at University of Notre Dame, Casey Pugh, Defense Information Systems Agency, Program Executive Office for Spectrum, and Needy Tandon, Distinguished Member of Technical Staff and Technical Fellow at AT&T. So please give a welcome and thank you to our Technical Program Committee for putting this together. Okay, next I'll say a few words about the logistics of our program this week. This might be a little boring. I might throw in a joke or two just to keep it lively, but I do need to go through this, and then I'll have a brief introduction too of the agenda. So the ISART agenda includes a variety of topics and types of conversations, and these are designed to keep you, the audience, engaged and interactive. You'll hear keynote speakers, fireside chats, panels, and also technical talks. In addition, we have carefully curated the tutorial that kicked off yesterday, where ITS engineers prepared materials and a coding environment to provide an interactive way for students of all ages to engage in a new way in ISART this year. So speaking of networking and discussions, we have several spaces in this venue dedicated to ISART, beginning with this plenary room. This is where all of the main agenda sessions will be held. Just across the registration desk, across the hallway there is the dodgeball room. Now, wouldn't this be fun if we in fact do not have a dodgeball court set up? The balls are in there actually, the way it's decorated, but maybe that's where the planning committee went wrong. We should have livened it up a little bit. But really, that's just a breakout room for conversations and discussions. No ball throwing allowed. If you go out and turn left and head down the hallway, you'll see a sign, and then to head to the lunchroom, it's called Peekaboo. On your left, that's where lunch will be served daily. Feel free to use the lunchroom and the hallways and the seats and tables for conversations after main sessions and then during the breaks and lunch. So each day we're going to begin promptly at 9 a.m. with opening remarks by a member of the technical program committee. If you take a look at the agenda, it was at the front desk out there. We planned lengthy breaks and long lunches in the schedule so that each day you have that opportunity to have discussions and an extended Q&A. So we encourage networking and a lot of that discussions between attendees. We provide a 15-minute break each morning, and then the lunches are 90 minutes around midday. Speaking of lunch, we have a lunch menu we've picked out for each day of the symposium for all 3 days for the convenience of folks in the room. So please take part in that. But if you have not paid in advance, you can pay at the registration desk on your way out for lunch. Please let them know that you'd like to partake and purchase a lunch ticket. Each afternoon, we'll include another 15-minute break, and then Each day concludes about 5 or 5:30. With the exception of Thursday, we're going to break out a little early to allow for maximum networking, and of course, taking those who have early flights out of DIA. So, given that our aim this week is consensus, lofty goal, I admit, I want to encourage you, the audience, to again engage with our speakers over the next 3 days. Consensus is not a static activity, certainly not for the faint of heart. But consensus is very much at the heart of what ISART means to the radio community. So please engage, please ask questions, and do not let our speakers off the hook. All right, this is an opportunity to make real progress toward real solutions and discuss ideas and network with some of your best and brightest colleagues. So please take advantage of that. All right, with that said, let me now turn to the main theme of ISART 2024, in pursuit of consensus on clutter. And let me set out an important and ambitious goal for this year's symposium. Now, ITS just finished hosting the ITUR Study Group 3 Working Party meetings held here at the Curtis in Denver, Colorado from May 29 to June 7. I want to mention just briefly 3 takeaways from SG3 that I think apply here in our week today in our discussions. Number one, over 70 delegates from 21 countries attended the meetings in person here in the U.S. And this is the first time that ITS has hosted SG3 since 2008. So that's a great turnout, on par with meetings in Geneva. And some of those who have stayed over in Denver to participate in ISART this week, and you'll be hearing from some of them as speakers. Number two, ITS and other SG3 delegates continued important discussions over the last 2 weeks and work to improve propagation modeling at the international level. Outcomes of this work will be used to improve global spectrum management and future revisions. And number three, there have been new exciting discussions in Study Group 3 on applying machine learning to clutter modeling. This work has only just begun, and there will be continued monthly meetings to explore machine learning applications to clutter modeling, as well as to all aspects of modeling. So like SG3, the technical topics in this year's ISART agenda are not just important to the US nationally. For example, you will hear many references this week to the National Spectrum Strategy and the Implementation Plan. But these critical topics are also important to the international stakeholder community as well, as we seek a forward-looking consensus on propagation modeling generally and clutter modeling more specifically. So at this point, let me take a moment to review the rationale and the goals for ISART. And, for over 2 decades, ISART has contributed scientific and technical input towards sound, forward-looking spectrum management and regulatory policies that have been informed by and fostered during this annual symposium. The focus of ISART is to engage in wide-ranging technical discussions in a unique forum with diverse colleagues. So ISART 2024 seeks consensus on how to address the pressing challenge of developing, agreeing on, and applying radio frequency propagation models that take into account the impact of foliage in buildings, or clutter, for planning of both spectrum policy and spectrum-dependent systems of all kinds. The development of such models has historically been fraught with competing methodologies, assumptions, and tool sets. Yet today's environment of ubiquitous spectrum sharing, increasing system diversity and complexity, and rapidly expanding exploitation of mid-band frequencies means that the demand for more modeling fidelity and greater modeling accuracy is both urgent and compelling. In short, ISART 2024 focuses on how the broader community of researchers and system owners can collectively marshal and invest its finite resources to develop, validate, and apply new, more broadly used clutter models. These tools are needed to ensure that the ambitious goals set forth in both the U.S. National Spectrum Strategy and the 2023 World Radio Conference can be achieved. So now let me turn to the meat of the agenda and go through that real briefly. During the symposium, I'm going to ask that, like, for instance, panelists introduce themselves very briefly and get to the discussions. We have printed bios in the agenda, so I'll keep this brief and we can do a quick review of the agenda, so just to let you guys know what's upcoming this week. So as I mentioned, we started ISART yesterday, day 0, with a technical tutorial. And also, as I mentioned, the unusual start to ISART emphasizes the importance NTIA places on having accurate science and plenty of sound data to guide sound policy. ITS knows the importance of rock-solid methodology to provide accurate data to inform decision-making, and that's why ITS engineers put a lot of effort into building robust verification and validation processes for propagation model software implementations. Specifically, yesterday, Max Hollingsworth did a great job and put an incredible program together, and so we're thankful for that. And so we're committed to sharing best practices like these with anyone who will listen, to build trust to the data. And so I, for one, really look forward to hearing the outcome and the recap of the tutorial that we're going to share on Thursday. But to begin today, our first speaker, Mr. Shiva Goel, is NTIA's recently appointed Senior Spectrum Advisor, formerly FCC. Yes, the boundary between FCC and NTIA is permeable in a good way, and our agencies have never been closer and more aligned. So creating informed, codified rules for spectrum sharing is one thing, but ultimately sharing success depends on physics and collaboration. And so we're excited to hear Mr. Goel's perspective this morning. Then we're going to have our first fireside chat in these three comfy chairs on the topic of clutter as a universal concern. The speakers will discuss global perspectives on the uses and importance of spectrum models that accurately represent the impact of clutter on propagation. Just a note here that the fireside chat format is specifically designed for you, the audience, for your engagement, and to hear in a smaller venue with just a couple speakers, a more in-depth and nuanced perspective and a closer look than you might typically get in your full larger panel. Each fireside chat will have two. We'll have a moderator, topic, and opportunity for audience engagement, and questions are encouraged. After the fireside chat, we're going to have two technical talks, one before lunch and one after lunch. And in the tradition of ISART, these are focused deep dives intended to provide insight into relevant topics for the panels that follow. We'll have a panel following each of the technical talks, and we will have at least two technical talks planned for each day. And also, we've scheduled a generous break for lunch, as I mentioned a couple times. ISART alumni know that opportunities for one-on-one conversations and networking are the hallmark of ISART, and our lunch arrangements are designed to promote those interactions. This afternoon's panels focus on propagation model development. There's no getting around the fact that implementing a propagation model in software is the key to broad usability. Like every software implementation, usability starts with articulating use cases and requirements. We have to understand what outputs are needed in order to make the model implementation useful to all stakeholders. We're not all physicists, so once we know where we are headed, we need a developmental process that is consistent, repeatable, and transparent in order to build trust in the output. And that's what today's panels will discuss. Tomorrow, Billy Kozma, who besides being the propagation modeling group lead at ITS, is head of the US delegation to the ITUR Study Group 3. We'll open the session with introductory remarks, followed by the second fireside chat, the reality of building consensus. Building consensus often relies on collaboration and discussion between disparate groups and organizations. How do you build consensus if each stakeholder approaches a complex challenge with different perspectives and priorities? What about the spectrum challenges of today? And how should we be thinking about the path forward? And we might not get definitive answers this week, but we can think about and start to think more creatively about approaches to the topic of consensus on clutter. Our technical talks tomorrow tackle the topics of uncertainty, deconfliction, and coordination. Consensus requires trust in the measurements, trust in the modeling, trust in the uncertainty analysis and the data, and establishing trust requires work. The morning panel tomorrow on measurements and data will address the need for common framework to capture high quality, diverse, and verifiable measurement data that is trusted. And the afternoon panel discusses how models can be adapted to scenarios that may not share the assumptions used in model development. On Thursday, day 3, we address how increased transparency of data and tooling can open the doors to more productive collaboration among government, industry, and academia. We open with technical talks on reproducibility and data sharing, and then a panel focused on openness, collaboration, and growing the community. It takes not a village, but the entire stakeholder community to achieve spectrum coexistence. Thursday afternoon, we come back after lunch to recap the outcomes of the hands-on modeling tutorial. Given the level of engagement we saw yesterday, I'm really looking forward to this recap discussion, as I mentioned. I hope you are too. And finally, ISART's traditional closing panel will discuss next steps. What do all of us walk away with this week from ISART that will advance consensus on the way forward? What are the concrete steps that will bring us closer to consensus on clutter? And I'm really hoping to probe that afternoon panel on Thursday to say something new that hasn't been said the rest of the week. And so it'll be interesting and engaging to hear their perspectives on what they learned and what their next steps are and specific action items that they identify following ISART. So I hope you'll join us on Thursday afternoon for that important topic. In closing, I'd like to say once again that I'm thrilled everyone is here virtually and online. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you're looking forward to the next 3 days as much as I am. With that said, let me introduce our next speaker. He's our first keynote of the ISART 2024, and Mr. Shiva Goel is the Senior Advisor for Spectrum Policy at the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA, where he leads the agency's efforts to meet the spectrum needs of the federal government, consumers, and the commercial sector on behalf of NTIA Administrator Alan Davidson. He just recently joined the team from the FCC, where he served as legal advisor to Jeffrey Starks on wireless, space, and international telecommunications policy matters. He was previously a partner in the telecom appellate and litigation practices of Harris, Wiltshire, and Granis LLP. He received his law degree, Order of the Coif, from the University of Virginia School of Law, and a BA from Cornell University. So please help me welcome to the stage Mr. Goel.
Thank you, Jeremy, for the introduction and for your leadership chairing this conference. And thanks to everyone at ITS for making this event happen. And good morning, ISART. As Jeremy mentioned, I joined NTIA a few months ago. So before we jump in, let me tell you just a bit about those first days and how ITS fit in. Like any government job, it started with plenty of IT and HR and getting up and running. I think most of this crew knows the drill. There was plenty of, let me see when you have 15 minutes to catch up on this band or this system you probably haven't heard of yet, and plenty of steps going back and forth down the long hallways of the Hoover building, hopping from one expert to another. Multiply that step count by at least 2 or 3, because if you've ever been there, it's a complete maze, and of course I got lost. The point is, it's never a dull moment in the NTIA Spectrum shop, yet amidst all the commotion, barely an hour would go by before I would hear someone sing this common refrain. You're new to NTIA, so let me tell you about the Institute of Telecommunications Science. It has been around in some capacity for 80 some odd years. It's not in Washington, but out in Boulder, Colorado. They've got their own radio quiet zone up on Table Mountain, and though few outside wireless know them by name, the team is truly first class, and the wireless success stories their work has underwritten are nothing short of remarkable. ITS, they would say, is a national treasure, and they would always use that endearing term. Weeks like this truly show the reason why, because once again, with this year's ISART, ITS has managed to focus on a research problem that isn't just technically interesting, but has real strategic importance to spectrum policy, and ultimately to a country that depends so much on wireless innovation. So let me take the rest of my time here to tell you about how we're thinking about clutter from the policy side, and about how it can help us do more with our networks, do more with spectrum initiatives that have been in process for years, and do more with newer efforts like the National Spectrum Strategy. Now, as Jeremy also mentioned, I'm a lawyer, I'm a policy guy, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a physicist, but here's what I know. Good wireless planning depends on good propagation model, so that we can predict how far a signal will travel and what is likely to stop, slow, or change its path along the way. If you do it right, these models will capture how spectrum behaves in the real world, not just in the laboratory. That means it'll account for not just the radio wave's natural expansion as it heads from, say, a cellular base station to a bunch of handsets down below, but also the environment through which that wave is traveling, including the trees and buildings that might absorb or scatter it along the way. That stuff is clutter. This may sound like an arcane topic to those who aren't paying attention, and that's why we're lucky so many of you are. Because if you look at some of the most significant wireless policy priorities over the past few decades, you'll see why building our capabilities on clutter can be a real force for progress. Take, for example, the importance of connecting everybody. That is the chief concern of my colleagues working on our fixed broadband programs, but it's also been a key aspect of U.S. mobile service policy for decades. Mobile licensees have seen their authorizations conditioned on achieving at times very specific levels of service, including rural service. Not unrelatedly, the national broadband map that underlies and powers the BEAD program now also includes mobile maps. Those maps have been proposed to serve as the basis for allocating funding support that could expand 5G to more rural communities. In these policy areas, as in the lived day-to-day experience of network engineers and network planners all across the country, good modeling moves the ball forward by helping us figure out whether consumers will have access in a given location. And if they won't have access, how to tweak the network and optimize the network so that they will, or determine that maybe this area ought to be eligible for funding support. That means there are direct digital divide dividends from building greater sophistication around concepts like clutter. Better analysis could mean better coverage and better performance for each dollar spent in a network, public or private dollars. It can mean fewer unserved areas and more Americans able to fully participate in a wireless revolution. Now, that's real impact. But of course, the value of modeling goes well beyond predicting whether a user will receive a signal they want. As important as that problem is, modeling also helps us determine whether another system stands at risk of receiving unwanted signals from something nearby. That leads us to a second and quite timely policy question of interest. In an increasingly congested spectral environment, how can we find ways to expand spectrum access so that we can meet our diverse and growing wireless needs as a country? How can we take what is usually a bane for the network planner, losses due to things like clutter, and turn it into a boon as we work to resolve the spectrum dilemma? Well, it turns out if you can build trusted models, to Jeremy's point around clutter, you can get to a point where incumbents and new entrants can coexist more efficiently in the same spectrum. You can show that a service won't interfere with a new service won't interfere with an old one in more cases. And that means you need to protect less geography from potential interference. You can serve more people. Now, that trusted element is key. Networks are deployed far and wide, while obstacles that clutter a signal vary greatly from place to place. That wide variation can lead to uncertainty about using clutter as a factor when predicting interference. And that uncertainty can lead to conservative modeling, which may not account for clutter at all. That may seem frustrating at times, but in that uncertainty lies opportunity. Because if you can tighten up the analysis and build trust, the goal of the work here this week, you'll leave less spectrum on the table. And I mean a lot less spectrum on the table because, as we know, clutter can attenuate a signal pretty dramatically at times, especially in places where usage tends to be high. Do this right and you get more service out to more people, and you get to do it in a win-win kind of way because you won't really be changing much about how the system being protected has to operate. The applications speak for themselves, and clutter analysis has already shown itself to be critical in bands previously identified for commercial use. What am I thinking of? Well, let's start with the first band open to wireless broadband and federal operations on a shared basis, AWS-3. It was auctioned back in 2014 to the tune of about $40 billion. Some government systems moved out of the band, but needed time to do it, while others were to remain for good. This created a need to coordinate new cellular deployments around those existing federal operations. The analysis driving that coordination was somewhat conservative, yet federal agencies, to their credit, committed to studying improvements over time. One key area of ongoing refinement lies in developing and validating clutter models so that commercial systems can deploy more widely in this very valuable sliver of spectrum, while giving federal agencies confidence that their systems will stay protected. What else am I thinking about? Well, 3.45 gigahertz provides a perhaps more recent example. There we saw 100 megahertz of midband auctioned for about $22 billion, subject to coordination with the Defense Department, which operates critical systems in the band. In partnership with DoD, ITS right now is advancing a program to create higher fidelity propagation models that could unlock more opportunity for commercial systems in zones currently subject to coordination. Clutter, of course, is part of that effort. Then there's CBRS in 3.5. In that band, we continue to search for ways to drive down the size of dynamic protection areas so that more Americans can access unencumbered mid-band spectrum. Stay tuned for more on that. So we tasked the CSMAC, the Commerce Spectrum Management Advisory Committee, to identify ways to improve the band's efficiency. What was right at the top of their list? Better propagation modeling that accounts for clutter. Between AWS 3, 3.45, CBRS, we are talking about critical bands that already support important federal missions and robust commercial use, right in the heart of midband. The goal, of course, is to help them live up to their fullest potential. Now, if we look at coexistence between commercial systems, you've also seen clutter play an important role. I'm thinking about the 6 gigahertz band, where you have automated frequency coordination systems that soon will coordinate higher power and outdoor unlicensed devices with fixed incumbent. To do so efficiently, those AFCs will account for terrain and clutter losses, enhancing our everyday Wi-Fi experience, unlocking more opportunity for wireless broadband, and continuing to show the world the wisdom of the U.S. approach to this important band. Now, I've been talking quite a bit about how pursuing a consensus on clutter can enhance spectrum decisions from years past. Let's fast forward. How are we thinking about spectrum today? Well, at NTIA, we see what you see. That connectivity, data, intelligent applications are growing in importance in just about every aspect of our daily lives. And we know that demand for commercial spectrum access is continuing to climb as a result. We're also fully aware that these same forces are driving public sector demand to meet important federal missions that protect national security, promote air safety, help us research climate change, and so much more. And perhaps all too well, we at NTIA know that as we look for more opportunities to expand spectrum access, the low-hanging fruit is gone. How are we responding? We're being smart, strategic, and forward-looking. Last November, the administration issued the National Spectrum Strategy, a blueprint to help us meet our nation's spectrum needs, harness innovation, and build economic and national security for years to come. In March, NTIA released an implementation plan that outlines clear milestones for how government and the private sector will help achieve the strategy's goals. Taken together, the National Spectrum Strategy and the implementation plan represent the most comprehensive and far-reaching overhaul of spectrum policy undertaken in decades. Now, how does this year's ISART fit in? Well, one hallmark of the strategy is to make spectrum decisions more evidence-based. This is why the band studies commit to exploring the full art of the possible, with day-to-day work executed within expert technical interchange groups. This is why the strategy embraces data and quantification for enhancing spectrum collaboration long-term. It's why it pushes on R&D and building a strong spectrum-skilled workforce. And it's why we're doing this work with broad input and with transparency. Later this month, ITS plans to release more than 6 million clutter measurements in the 3 to 4 gigahertz range and to make them publicly available in an open source repository. ITS is also moving towards applying their measurement techniques toward the 7 and 8 gigahertz range. To help translate that work into action, ITS yesterday hosted that tutorial session that you heard about and may have attended that ran through the traps and ins and outs of developing models using these measurements. These initiatives will lay a strong foundation for refining and improving clutter analysis transparently and in a way that encourages trust. This is how you innovate, iterate, and build consensus in spectrum. This is how you find untapped ways to get more service out to more people when the low-hanging fruit is gone. This is what evidence-based spectrum policy looks like. This is also the kind of work that finds opportunity across all 4 of the strategy's pillars. It could aid technical interchange groups as they evaluate opportunities in the band studies. That's pillar 1. It could help us add objectivity and rigor to enhance collaboration long-term, pillar 2. It can drive R&D, including into spectrum sharing enhancements. That's pillar 3. And it can help more spectrum professionals develop expertise and engage on these important issues. Pillar 4. Let me wrap up with the context. Wireless usage is going up year over year across seemingly all verticals, technologies, and configurations. Terrestrial and satellite, or hybrid, commercial, military, scientific, or hybrid, wide area, local area, personal area, or a hybrid, all of it. And that, of course, is based on the present application environment. It says nothing about what lies ahead in our technological future, which could test our network's capabilities in ways we just can't predict. So it's not an overstatement to say that the problem we're all trying to solve is one of the most significant tech policy challenges of our generation. In my mind, there has never been a more important time to build a strong and resilient wireless infrastructure, and spectrum, of course, is part of that infrastructure. The work you're doing this week is critical to getting that work done. Thank you for the effort. Enjoy the conference, and I'm excited to learn with you over the course of the week.